So first, I just want to say thank you. I was so excited to be offered an opportunity to speak at Startup Festival. I had no idea. How many of you have been here before? Yeah, so I'm sure the rest of you, like me, were just blown away this morning when you walked in and saw it actually as a festival and not a conference. So I think the best way to start this morning is to talk to you about why I'm here, as opposed to any of the other places we could all be today. And I was fortunate enough when I was 25 years old to walk away from a really good job. And that is what led me here. I had gone to work straight out of college to a Fortune 100 company in the States, Texas Instruments, and we were working on really interesting stuff, and I got a promotion every 6 months, and I was starting to manage some people, not very well, but I was managing some, and it was a pretty stable job, and I was getting respected and rewarded and all those things. And then I noticed some people from our division started leaving, and they were like really well-respected managers, people I thought a lot of, people I liked working with. And then I saw a few more people leave, and then word got out that they had started a little venture down the road. And this was in Houston, Texas in the early 80s, so there weren't a lot of little ventures being started down the road as there are now in sort of some different hubs for technology. But anyway, I was really interested, and so I called them and said, tell me what you're doing. And they said, well, we can't even tell you what we're doing because there's a lawsuit now between the big company and the little company because they think we're poaching employees. So we can't even tell you what we're doing. We can tell you we haven't launched a product yet. We don't have any revenue yet. What we have is a lot of really good people with a cool idea. And I thought, well, I don't have a lot to lose here. I am confident in my ability to get another job, as I hope that all of you are. And I know that this is a group of people that I want to work with, and I want to work on a really cool idea. And so I quit my big job. I went to the little startup. I was employee 104, which probably sounds like a lot of employees to some of you.
Going to the rat wheel in between.
Okay, I think that's Marie. But anyway, we hadn't launched a product yet. We didn't have any revenue. We just had a lot of people who had some funding from sort of early venture capitalists, the Seven Rosen Fund, and John Doerr was on the board. And so anyway, I went there. We launched the product. It was, as Marie said, it wasn't the first portable computer, but it was the first sort of business portable computer. It was IBM compatible, and compatibility mattered at that point in time because businesses only used IBMs. But it was like a sewing machine case. It was a giant. I mean, I would see people all over the world lugging these things around, but it's all we had. And we knew then that mobile was important. And so we found an amazing product market fit, and then the world exploded. We had so much opportunity, so many orders, and we had this little team of people and a little bit of space, and we needed to fulfill those orders. And that's when I learned the big lesson that led me to my consulting career and the work I do today, which that hypergrowth is really all about execution. You absolutely have to have a product market fit. You have to have your big idea. A lot of people have big ideas. We're going to talk about some of those today. But what most people don't have is the ability to execute. We get out of alignment with our external and internal strategies. The external strategy, which is what drives the growth and the sales, the internal strategies have to support that. You have to be able to sort of bring form to the vision. And so we're going to talk today about how to do that. And I think that's particularly important to this audience because although you'll get funded for your big idea, we hear over and over again that investors invest in the team as much as they invest in the idea. And so the ability to create the right team, but then to sustain alignment with that team and that team's ability to support growth is really important. So I got a call not very long ago from a CEO of a company I hadn't heard of, a little company in Charleston, South Carolina. And I didn't know this guy, but a SVP of development I had worked with before had just gone to work for him and recommended me. So this guy calls and he said, we're growing really fast. We've had triple-digit growth now for 3 years, and that's all good. But I'm beginning to see some cracks in the organization. We're just getting big enough, and the growth is fast enough that we're not aligned anymore in the work that we're doing. We're getting out of balance. And that getting out of balance, it's causing cracks at the top, but in the rest of the organization, they're like crevices, right? We're just not doing as well as we could do. And I have a lot of questions as a first-time CEO about what to do about that. I don't know how many people we should be hiring. I don't know what they should be doing. I don't know what processes and tools we should put into place. I'm unclear about what to do with my time because what I'm doing now, it's not sustainable. I can't keep doing what I'm doing as the company grows. And I have no idea how to keep this whole ball of wax accountable for doing the things that they say they're going to do. And so I said, yes, of course, I would work and partner with him because that's the work I do. It's basically consulting on growth. And so that brings me back to this idea of execution, right? You have your big idea, you have your funding, but then you actually have to go do it. And in order to do it, you have to rely on your teams because this is all about execution, and execution is all about how your team works. So this is a workshop, and I'm going to start by putting you to work a little bit. And I'm going to ask you right now just to think about what was the worst team you were ever on, right? So I know we've all been on some bad teams. And I see a little grimacing over here and a little smirking over here. But what was really the worst team you were ever on, a really bad team experience? Has everybody got one of those in their head? Great. I know it's 9 a.m, but everybody is thinking. I see some caffeine on the tables. So think about that worst team, and then think about what made it the worst team. Why is it so particularly memorable to you? So I want you to pair up now with someone that you don't know well. So if you're sitting next to your best friend or the person you work with, maybe turn behind you. But get into pairs, and if you need to get into trios, that's fine. And let's just spend a couple of minutes. You tell this person you're paired up with, what was your worst team? And hear from them what their worst team was. And then let's tease out what were the core behaviors that made the team so bad, right? Any questions about what I'm asking you to do? All right, I'll give you 6 or 7 minutes, and we'll check back in. If I could get your attention back at the front, please. Yeah. Great. These are the times when I am so happy to have a mic. Yep. Great. So I love this part of working with groups because there is no shortage of things to talk about when we talk about bad teams, and there's so much energy in the room. So I'd just like to hear a few things that you've teased out as core behaviors in terms of really the worst teams that you were on. We don't have too much time, so just concise, sort of what was a core behavior of the bad team that you were on? So any volunteers to share something? Just, yes.
Hello, my name is Marina.
Hi, Marina.
We shared with Shay, and pretty much it came to the same thing, no communication.
No communication.
People were nice, it's not that
Yep, super nice people, but no communication. Yep.
all of us worked well, but there was no
Yep.
one way of working or going the same direction.
Great. So sort of no alignment, and that all caused by poor communication. Thank you. What else? Yes?
Changing goalposts.
Changing goalposts. Yeah. So you start out thinking you're going here, and actually the goal's moved or here or somewhere we don't know. Great example. Yes?
We talked about boundary setting in so far as certain team members were not respecting boundaries that were set and were also not communicating their own boundaries to other team members.
Great. So understanding what the boundaries are and then respecting them and making sure that there's shared set of boundaries. Perfect. Yes? Skill sets.
When you hire someone, you have a JD which person match 60 to 70%.
Yep.
On the way down, you figure out, okay, this skill set was not right what I was looking for. So there's always a mismatch happens.
Yeah, so a mismatch in terms of skill set. That's really common. Appreciate that. Anyone else? We'll get a couple more, yes?
Laziness, not sharing the same values.
Oh, not sharing the same values. So you're really starting from a very different place, which means you're going to end up in a different place. Great, or at least a different way to get there, for sure. Okay, maybe one more from the group? Yes.
Not setting clear expectations, deadline, or not respecting each other's time.
Great. Yeah. So you just muddle around. You don't have any clear expectations about timelines when things should be done, and so you just muddle around. Really great example. So these are the things I call the dumbing down factors. They are part of what keeps your organization from reaching its potential and keeps your team from doing the work it needs to do. And what we know is this is all stuff where we get in our own way. This is not somebody from the outside making your life difficult. This is you and your team getting in your own way. And it's not rocket science. But we tend to think that it's the same set of skills that make us amazing individual contributors will make us really good team members. And while there's definitely some commonality and overlap there, they are different things. So let's talk about, what is dumbing down and why do we care? So dumbing down, for me, is one of the main reasons that there's misalignment and sort of leaving potential on the conference room table in an organization. And my shorthand for that is that it's teamwork as usual. And we all have been part of teams that were teamwork as usual. It is where we show up, we decide we're going to work together as a team, might have some kickoff event, we get hats, we get t-shirts, we get a slogan, and then we're exhorted to go back and work together as a team. And maybe at the beginning, because everybody has shown up with really good intentions, we get glimmers of sort of this promise that happens in a high-performing team, but then pretty soon reality and the old way sort of set back in. And office politics start to show up again, or conflicts show up and they don't get resolved, or any of these many issues that you brought up come back up and they're not dealt with. And so the team sort of becomes a tar pit, and your A players, they don't want to work in a place like that. And so they'll stop contributing to the team, or eventually they'll head for the exits. And there are many causes why this happens, but it happens over and over again. And what I want to do today is help share some help with you so that you don't have to go through that with your teams, because you have other things you need to be focused on. And what you want is a team that works like a well-oiled machine, sort of supporting you and doing the things that they need to do. And that, by the way, is what your team members want as well. So I recently took up the sport of rowing. So any of you are scullers or rowers, and I went into this and I thought, wow, I am going to be so buff, my arms and my back, because this is going to be an amazing arms and back exercise. And so the first time I did it, I'm like all arms and backs, and it turns out you do need your arms and backs to rowing, but it's really a leg exercise. And if your legs can't keep up with your arms and backs, you cannot row. Your boat will flounder. It may not tip over, but you're certainly not going to be a contributing part of any team that you're working with in the boat, and it'll be hard to do yourself. And that's exactly what happens on many of our teams. We go in with one set of expectations. It turns out it's something else. Maybe we have a weak team member, in my case, my legs, that can't keep up with the rest of the team. And one thing we know is, and this will be a takeaway for you guys, is that a team can only perform at the level of its lowest performing member. And so what we don't want is for people to dumb down to that level. We want everybody working at their potential so that the team can work at its potential. And you can't do that if you have mismatched skills, for example. You really have to be aligned in this way. So some other causes having to do with these worst teams. I'll share this with you. You guys will get these slides so you'll see it, but these are the things I almost always ask people to tell me about the worst teams they're on, whether we're working one-on-one or we're working in a group. And these are the things that people tell me, and they're not at all dissimilar from what you told me. There are mismatched skills and abilities. There's cynicism that begins to creep in when problems aren't solved. There's one of my personal favorites, using the flywheel. And the flywheel for me is a really bad thing. When you're a small company, everything you do or don't do has an impact on the organization. When you're part of a larger organization, the flywheel gets going and all you have to do is just put a little bit of effort in to keep it going. And that is not sort of using your potential or helping to contribute to the potential of the organization. So really common list of worst teams things. Now, the 3 causes of bad teams and organizations and dumbing down, the first thing I would say is it's a blind spot. We don't realize it's happening, right? You start out, you're this size, you have a really amazing group of people that you're working with, and then little by little, you bring other people into the organization. And I would say this got to be a big issue at Compact. So remember, we had this amazing growth story, and as you can imagine, we had to hire a lot of people to make all that happen. Now, when people started at Compact, we were small, we all had the same vision, the same values, we had the same work ethic. And then when you're 100 people, that's one thing. When you're 1,000 people or 5,000 people, eventually you're like, could I just get someone in this seat to do this job? Because I can't keep doing the 6 jobs that I'm doing. And people come to a company for different kinds of things when you're larger. For example, I had people tell me when we were larger that they came to work at Compact because the benefits were good. Now, these are not bad people or wrong people, but they're coming to work for a different reason than the reason that I came or the reason that you've started your company. And so make sure you don't have a blind spot about sort of this shared base of values in the organization. It's sort of like that frog in the pot of boiling water, right? You don't see it right away, but every hire that you make impacts your culture. And so make sure that you're really vigilant about that. Now, the second reason that people have dumbing down in their organizations really has to do with what I call over-applied individualism. Now, I grew up in Texas, and we're all about individualism, so I get that, and it's part of what makes us really good high achievers as individual contributors. But I had a tech company that I worked with years ago where I got called in because they were a development team, senior development team, and they were missing their deadlines. They were having a really hard time keeping up and getting stuff done. And so I came in and we decided, well, we're going to sort of diagnose the problem and then see what we can do to fix it. And the first thing we did was to take the team off site for a couple days so they could talk through what was going on and figure out some new behaviors and then set a pathway for making their behaviors and their intentions match each other. And I had been told there was this one guy in particular that was sort of the cause of the problem. And so any of you who've worked with developers know we often run into people who are really technically brilliant but don't have the social skills necessary to work with other people. And this guy, I started out by asking people what they hoped and expected from the workshop and from each other. And he was really cynical in his responses, which sort of made me question a bit. But I noticed he had on this really interesting ring. And so I went over during the break and I asked him about it. And he said, oh yeah, this is an amazing ring. I got this ring in college, and you can see it has a picture of the community where we went to school. It has some symbols on it, and it has this barnyard animal on it. And I'm not going to tell you what the animal was because I don't want to give the school away. But he went on to say, we get this during our senior year and we wear it, and it's sort of facing inward at us. So we'll really, dig deep and get through our senior year. But then afterwards, we turn it around so that it's facing the other direction. And this animal in particular is facing outward, and it's facing outward so that it will excrete on other people. And I said, oh my God, what did you just say? And he said, oh yeah, because other people are not as smart as we are that went to my school. And so this is my reminder every day. And I thought, wow, no wonder you are having problems working together as a team, right? Over-applied individualism. And so we went on with our workshop, and he eventually said, hey, I'm not doing this with these people. And I had my moment of, why are you wasting our time? But then I realized this is exactly what happens in the office. He doesn't believe he has to work with people. It's enough for him to be really good technically. And it's what got him to the place that he is today. So we got through the rest of our workshop. It was really clear what some of the issues were that needed to be dealt with outside of what we could do together. And about 2 weeks later, I talked with the leader of the team, and she said, I fired him. It was just clear that it was too much work to have him on the team. He was technically brilliant. I'm sure we'll miss some of those skills, but we were getting on our own way by having this guy around. Now, don't ever let someone go from your team just because they're different, right? Diversity of sort of any form that it comes in, including and especially thought, are important to have on a team. But if someone's not committed to working in alignment with the rest of the team, they're not part of your future unless you can find a way to put them in an individual contributor role. Now, the third thing that contributes to dumbing down has to do with culture. And I'll just briefly tell you about a company that I was called into where the CEO told me about how really horrible it was to work there. He sat me down and he said, it's like all these sad sacks that are working here. They come to work in the morning and they start grousing about why does the sun have to rise in the east, sort of like Eeyore on Winnie the Pooh. But he said, it's just gray and I just don't even like coming to work anymore. And I sat there sort of fascinated by what I wasn't hearing because he wasn't saying what he had done about it. And so I think as founders and CEOs of your organizations, this is a really important lesson. If you don't take care of these things in your organization, no one else will. You have to model the way, you have to set expectations, you have to say what are the values that we're going to have, and how will we know if we get them. And as important as rewarding those behaviors that you want are, you also have to disincent the behaviors that you don't want. Because when people have behaviors that you don't want and you let it happen, other people believe that's okay, because that's what they see and that's the signal you're giving off. So really pay attention to the culture that you're creating, both in terms of its positives and making sure that you take care of the negatives. So that's a little bit about dumbing down. I often ask people then to think about sort of the best teams they've been on. We're a little limited on our time this morning, so I'll just share with you, and hopefully you've had some of these experiences as well. So you have complementary skills, you have conflict resolution that really is the same as what the situation needs. There's accountability, and you recognize that team is a process, it's not just a moment, right? It's sort of like this. Startup is a process, it's not just a moment, right? You don't come to Startup Festival, you'll get all these amazing skills, but then you have to go do something with them, and that's a continuing journey and process that you'll be part of. So no dumbing down is really a cultural issue, and if you don't dumb down, know that your team won't either. So I have a couple of other strategies I want to make sure that we get to before our time is up. And the next thing is just to talk about this idea of what I call levitating or creating time to think. So this is something for you personally for the most part. So this is the Eisenhower box. Have people seen this before? Great, yeah. So I got introduced to it originally as part of Stephen Covey's work, and now James Clear, if anybody follows him, who's an amazing writer, has sort of repopularized it. But it's really looking at how do you spend your time. And the crosshairs here are around important and urgent. And what tends to happen in organizations, in our lives, in today's lives, is that we spend all of our time on things that are urgent. So sort of the left-hand side of this 2x2. And when we spend our time on things that are urgent, we end up playing whack-a-mole. So has anybody ever played the whack-a-mole game, or have you heard about the whack-a-mole game? So this is really popular, I think, back in the 70s, and it came in sort of this big arcade form, but it also came in a sort of small thing you could play at home. Well, the way whack-a-mole works is you have a board, and you have holes in it and some mechanism, and you have a big rubber mallet. And what you do is you take this rubber mallet, and as the moles randomly pop up through the board, your job is to hit them on the head and force them back into the board. Now, I believe we spend a lot of our days playing whack-a-mole because we're problem solving. And problem solving is important. It is definitely part of your job, but it is not your entire job, right? You need to be thinking about what are the problems I'm going to solve. Because if you're not doing that, if you're not creating time to think, you're just going to play whack-a-mole and you can't win, right? The problems are never going to stop surfacing. I have so many people who tell me, I get my work done nights and weekends because during the day I'm in meetings all the time solving problems, right? You want to make sure, and this is really what you get paid for and what you get funded for, is how do you make sure that you are solving the right problems? Yeah. So you want to do this, right? You want to move away from the stuff at the bottom of this chart, which is sort of the fog of every day. It's dealing with things that are urgent all the time and things that are both urgent and not important, which is we hopefully spend little of our time. But also, you don't do your best work when you're doing work that's urgent and important. Where the place that you want to be is sort of the upper left hand of that Eisenhower box, which is not urgent and important. So just a couple of quick stories about how people have done that really successfully. So on an individual basis, there's a guy named Ross Mason in San Francisco. He was working as a corporate IT developer. Actually was working on the Isle of Malta, which is a pretty cool place to be doing IT development. And he was working and he was solving the same problem over and over again, and it was really hard. And every evening he would sort of bitch to his wife about, this is harder than it needs to be. And one day she said, "Stop it. I am tired of you moaning about this. If it's that difficult, go fix it." And so he did. He spent the next 3 years of his free time creating software that would be an integrated platform to tie different software systems together. And he named it Mule. And that company became MuleSoft. And MuleSoft did really well. In 2017, they went public. They were up 45% on their first day of trading. And Ross said right after that, as the founder, people would come up to him and give him a little nudge and say, "Well, what are you going to do now?" And he said, "Well, I'm going to keep doing whatever I have to do to make MuleSoft better." And they'd say, "Okay, wink, wink, what are you really going to do now?" And he said, "I'm really going to spend my time figuring out how to make MuleSoft better." But he was thinking about how to make MuleSoft better, not just dealing with the next problem that popped up. And the way that he says that he did this is that every year, at the end of the year, he'd sit down and he really devoted a lot of time to thinking about what does the company need now. He carved out time to think. He said he'd put his feet up, he'd get a little glass of whiskey, and he would just sit for evenings and really think about this year what MuleSoft needs for me is technology help. And this year, what MuleSoft needs for me is help in sales. Whatever it was, that's where he applied his energy. Now, MuleSoft went on to even bigger success. They were bought by Salesforce last year for $6.5 billion, which is an amazing story, from nothing to $6.5 billion. And that was an idea that somebody took action on, right? Which is exactly what you're doing. But you have to create time to think. Now, it's also important for you to get your teams to take time to think, because you think you're running around playing whack-a-mole. They are doing the same thing. And you have to change the mindset in order for that to happen. There's a great story I heard. Tom Bilyeu, who's the founder of Quest Nutrition. Does anybody listen to the Peter Attia podcast? Oh, this is an amazing podcast. It's called The Drive. Great, yeah. So Tom Bilyeu was on this podcast, and he said, "Look, I founded this company, and I decided I was going to interview every single person that came in the door that went to work for us. I interviewed more than 1,500 people," he says. And he said, "You think about things you do 1,500 times, it doesn't seem like so much, but let me tell you, if you're interviewing people 1,500 times, it's a lot of interviewing." But he said, "I really wanted to understand pretty quickly sort of what was sort of the core to the people I was interviewing. And so I asked them, I said, look, I have a magic genie." He has a magic genie question. He says, "I have a magic genie. You can have anything you want. What are you asking for?" And people said, "Well, I want a job." And he said, "Okay, well, you're here for a job interview. Of course you want a job. Tell me, what would you do with the job? Why do you want the job?" And they're like, "Well, I want money." And he said, "Okay, so if you're asking the magic genie for money, maybe there's a problem anyway, but if you want money, how much money do you want?" And he said, incredibly, 1,500 people told me exactly the same thing. How much money did they tell him that they wanted? They all said $1 million. And he's like, $1 million? We're in Los Angeles. You can't even buy a house here for $1 million. But he said the first few people that walked in and said this to me, I thought, that's interesting. And then 10 to 15 people walked in and said it, and I thought, now my team is screwing with me. They are telling people to come in here and say this. And then we got to about 25, and I realized something important about humanity. And that is that people can't dream bigger than they can think. And you want a team that can dream bigger than they can think. He said, these people asking for $1 million, they are never going to dream about terraforming Mars. Right? So terraforming Mars is about making it habitable, but these people, they couldn't go, he said, I couldn't get anybody even to go to $10 million, never mind $1 billion, or terraforming Mars. You have to create ways for your time to think bigger, and you have to encourage them to think bigger. Because if they don't, you're going to get stuck in this box that you've created for yourself by the limited thinking that goes on in your organization. Now, I want to just give you one more thought, because what happens in workshops like this and in settings like this, however fabulous, is that we have to take the ideas out of here and execute on them. That's really what you're here to do. Get funding and then go do something with it. So I want each of you to think for just a minute about one thing that you could do that would make a difference to your startup. Just one that would make a big difference. It's something you could do, you feel you have a reasonable chance of success at. So everybody got one idea, hopefully something either you picked up this morning or you walked in here with that you know that you need to do. Great. So what we want to do is make sure that you can execute on that. Yeah? And the key to execution, well, it's all about accountability. And you must have processes in your startup to hold yourself and your team mutually accountable, right? You can make things a habit. We're really good at that around the first year, especially. You can have a why, the why you want this thing to be different. But if you don't have sort of mutually accountability processes in your organization, your chances of success will definitely be lower. So just a brief story about, I have a friend whose name is Mark Levy, and Mark is a brand positioning consultant, something I didn't even know existed 10 years ago, but this is what he does. And Mark's really successful. He could work 24 hours a day if he wanted to, but people call him, they call him with really important problems, he helps them solve them, and then he goes on to the next one. But Mark told me one day, he said, you know, I stop work every day at 4:30. And I said, wow, that's amazing. Why do you stop work every day at 4:30? And he said, well, I go to the gym. I said, okay, well, why do you go to the gym every day at 4:30? And he said, because I stopped going to the gym and bad things happened. He said, what happened was I had this habit, let me get some water, of going to the gym every day at 4:30. And then I had a client call. And the client said, what? The client said, I want to talk with you today, and I really can only talk at 4:30. And Mark said, well, okay, I'll make an exception, and I will talk with you today. And, of course, other clients had also called, and so once he made one exception, he made more exceptions. And pretty soon, that one exception turned into 2, turned into 3, turned into 4, and Mark found himself not going to the gym very much. And eventually, he noticed he gained a lot of weight. And then he got sick, and he said, I never get sick, but I got sick. And so he said, the problem is, he thought about it, I stopped going to the gym at 4:30. And so I've lost my voice. There we go. Okay. I am going to lose my voice, but not until afterwards. Thank you. So he realized it was because he stopped going to the gym. So Mark started going to the gym at 4:30, and it's now a hard and fast rule for him that he goes to the gym at 4:30. Is there something I should be doing different? I get some head nodding. Okay. I'm going to carry on as if you can't hear me in the back, just raise your hand and I'll try to project even more. Thank you. So Mark starts going to the gym again at 4:30. He gets his sharpness and his clarity back. He loses weight. He stops getting sick. And now that's Mark's deal. He goes to the gym at 4:30 every day. So this is a really good example. If you look at this, these 4 quadrants of accountability, we're really looking at how you hold yourself accountable. So this axis is self-accountability, and this axis is other accountability. So if we look at the place that's in the lower left, it's labeled flounder. So this is low accountability for self and low from others. This is like sort of a fish flopping out of water. If there's no accountability on anyone's part, chances of getting something done are pretty small. On the other hand, if you go up, you see the fearful box. This is where others are holding you accountable. Now, this could be your founders, right? It could be anyone in the spectrum. For me, I always think about the United States IRS, right? I have to pay my taxes. It's not something I want to do. I would never hold myself, accountable for doing that. But the IRS is holding me accountable, and because I'm fearful, I do it, right? So I tend to get things done, but I don't do my best work there. Right? Now, the bottom right, the fragile space, this is self-accountability. And all of you are really good at holding yourselves accountable, or you wouldn't be here. You would not have gotten this far. The problem with self-accountability, as we saw in Mark's case, is that it's fragile. Right? If you're only holding yourself accountable, you can get distracted by shiny new objects in many cases. Things happen. You have competing priorities. And so everything important doesn't get done that you've committed to do. So the sweet spot here is really up in the flourish for self and other accountability. And this is mutual accountability in your organization. And this is like the master key, the skeleton key to making your organization work. Have clarity about the things that need to happen. Have clarity about what success looks like so you and the team know how to get there. Make sure that you've shared your intentions. So when people have to make the 10,000 decisions that they make every day, they know the context they're making those decisions in. And then have a way to check in with each other to see how you're doing. Debrief. How's it going? Are we on the path we thought we were going to be on? And then make sure that you continue to be aligned so that the organization can flourish. Because without this, you'll get back to the misalignment and the dumbing down that we talked about earlier. So I want you to take that one thing now that you thought about earlier that you want to make sure that you get done, and I want you to apply a little accountability to it. So think about how is it that you can hold yourself accountable for getting this done, and you can have your team hold you accountable for getting this thing done, right? And pair up again. You can pair up with someone who's different, and introduce yourself, of course, and just take a couple of minutes and talk about your accountability scheme for this and see if the other person can layer on a little to help you so that you walk out of here sure that you have an accountability system in place to get the one idea done. And let's just take about 2 minutes to do that, and then we'll wrap up and on to something with cool drinks and a little fan. Yeah. So I'm thrilled to see so much energy for getting things done, and I hope you'll take away from today this energy for accountability. Because without accountability, this turns into a so what. I so appreciate the help from the back with speaking up. Thank you. Without accountability, this all turns into a so what. Right? It's just a good idea. But what you want is to be able to act on that idea, to be able to execute on that idea. So accountability is the master key for that. I just want to say thank you for our time today. Best wishes for getting funded and executing on that funding and on your big ideas. Thank you again. I'm Karen Walker, and we've been talking about no dumbing down. I will be around for Q&A if anybody wants to grab me over at the tent. Thanks.
Yeah,